Hello, how are you today? I'm Michael Fraser and I'm studying Engineering Complexity at 4500. Today I'm going to demonstrate how I demonstrate this assignment 4 of how I demonstrate how complexity can be presented within complexity and how the complexity is apparent from simplicity. These two underlying themes of the course and the assignment are presented through the methods of demonstrating complexity for a sighted person and then demonstrating simplicity for a non-sighted person. Due to myself, being a sighted person, gives the challenge of how me trying to use my own heuristics and looking at my past experiences of how I choose to solve puzzles, and then trying to flip and reverse this to try and get a result for the non-sighted person. I also need to try and use my own empathy to try and sit in the shoes and position of the non-sighted person and see how they solve problems themselves. I demonstrated this empathy and trying to build my knowledge in this area through watching the videos online, which helped me which helped me understand how non-sighted people solve puzzles and what's easy comes to them. And then also going to further research, to building a product that focuses on these two components, answers the question of complexity from simplicity, as well as simplicity from complexity and vice versa. I put into practice. I started at using convergent thinking to trying to broaden my horizon of trying to think of different ways to implement this design. But then I started to, I finished and found a particular design through using divergent thinking in which to settle on a design that I wish to pursue. When demonstrating in these videos, I'll go through a number of sections. With first, I'm trying to demonstrate how I come up with the idea, and then how I implement this idea, trying to demonstrate the design thinking that I interacted with and implemented throughout this process. I tried to build a product through the entire process through using my own semiotics to try and step back, to try and look at the system that was being created and how I'll demonstrate my own critical reflection in the process of this, as this was continually being done to try and use a feedback loop to try and improve my design. This will be demonstrated throughout my speech today, as well as my reflection article. Further demonstrating this, I try to embed my own part of critical reflection of the course and into myself, but then also into the user who's trying to complete the puzzle from the sighted person's perspective. This is as trying to demonstrate simplicity through the complexity, but then comes after the critical reflection, as the complexity is first apparent in the chaos of solving the puzzle. It can be shown that the sighted person and the analogies of this project shows how the complex situation that is presented, and then once the complex situation has a lot of time to critical reflect, going down the correct path, and then critical reflecting on what the right path could be, they realise that, which can be shown through the demonstration, that they need to go into chaos situations and really complex projects and just try and negate all the distractions and then jump in without any conclusions being drawn, and really focus on looking at the connections between components, which try and and that really breaks down to try and make a simple process, which is seen from the non-sighted person. So going through my research, the non-sighted person goes in without a lot of distractions that come from sight, and they really try and focus on the connections between components, which makes it really simple to be able to solve my puzzle. However, the sighted person, they get caught up in all the other distractions and forget the interactions, which is really a strong analogy to complexity in this project, and a strong analogy of how going into life with a complex situation is broken down for a sighted person. Thank you. Prototype design. I demonstrate design thinking and also the definition of innovation through demonstrating my own T-shaped person, to trying to apply my own field of study of electrical engineering over a simple product of a puzzle design, to try and demonstrate how I'm a T-shaped person and can incorporate this. This can be shown through demonstrating how I have an electrical system that is operating throughout the puzzle that cannot be seen by the sighted person, but then the connections can be felt with the non-sighted person. The end result connects the 3 1.5 volt batteries, which ends up to be 4.5 volts, to a little fan. That the end result is to connect the path that flows electricity through the box to be able to have the fan blow in the end. The initial part of the puzzle is the speech given is to say, solve the puzzle to turn on the fan. That's just all that is given at the very start of the project. So I'll go through some quick little photos and auditory to try and demonstrate the design thinking, laying over what was going on when I was building this prototype, and that involved its own feedback loop of the process of trying to continually improve this product and having the end result after testing get implemented back into the initial result to become a really perfect product. So I started this project after using my convergent and divergent thinking and trying to get my ideas into a piece of paper and trying to get rid of first choice fixation. With this, I drew up a plan of my divergent solutions and then trying to leave this plan for a couple of days and then trying to make sure that this was what I really wanted to do. After I wrote out my plan, which can be seen on this paper, it showed a quick overview and then getting my thoughts out of my head into reality to try and get thought of how this process could be put together. I then set this away for a couple of days, which then allowed me to think about what if this was actually the way I really wanted to go, and then came back to it, and then realizing this was the method I wanted to try and get along with. Going to this design, I have an electric fan that can run off a few little batteries added together. With this, I've used some of my electrical engineering skills to find out the electricity that is needed to flow through the circuit to turn on the fan. This was above the 3.3 volts, so I have 4 batteries in line together that power up to be 4.5 volts, as I can see through this picture. I've used this to indent into the board just to try and have a flat surface to make it easy to roll over from the non-sighted person. So the initial starting of the project, when I was actually trying to implement the blocks, I was looking at how to map out the path and then just start drilling out the centerpieces of this project. With this, I can see that I'm mapping out the path on the blocks to try and show how the blocks will go together and the electrical path will flow through the project. Now, I have to work out a way how to drill out each of the centers and then put each of the centers so then they can't be, you can't tell or see through a sighted person what way the electricity will flow. In this, I'll demonstrate later on that I've covered up each of the sides with aluminium foil to try and show that even through sight, you can't actually see which way the electricity is flowing through just looking at the holes. This way, each part is concealed to the sighted person, and the only way to figure out the path of the circle will be later on through touch and feel, and you can't tell through the aluminium foil. So using my engineering background, I use aluminium foil through this process to try and use design thinking of how that any part of electricity flowing will flow through the aluminium foil and then flow through the course of the circuit. This would mean and show that you don't need a real tight connection, and through as long as the aluminium foils are touching, and on the other side the copper wire is touching aluminium foil, then this will allow electricity to flow. Aluminium is a product that allows electricity to flow, and this is why this is chosen. To implement the project, I started with having 2 different, cutting out the hole for the battery and then drilling in these holes so then both sides of the wires can be put into place for this. I had to start out with the project with having the initial piece glued into position, so I had to use some different types of mechanical devices to try and hold these blocks in place to be able to glue these blocks into position. So the starting and the end blocks I started already glued in the puzzle to give the electricity to flow every single time and start and end at the same positioning. This is key to be able to have the electrical circuit function every single time, unless initially I tried to do it without having a end block, but this was too hard, and having a feedback loop for my critical reflection of my path, understood that I needed to have these in fixed position, because the connection with the end fan and the connection with the battery can't really be something that continually moves and needs to be initially put in place hard, so then you build the blocks around this to complete the electrical circuit to be able to turn on the fan. So I'm looking to the design. So looking at this picture, I show there's 2 different methods for completing the actual path of electricity path. I do this so I can gain an extra 10% for the course to demonstrate how the components of this design can be put in place in 2 different functions to be allowed the electricity to flow to turn on the fan. And then also I have, if you're looking at this, I show that I have a tick and using semiotics to show how symbols match up. Through using assignment 1, we show that a tick means good and a cross means bad. With this, I can show that I've etched on this side two engravings that have a tick on below, showing that you match up the two engravings. Then I look at the outdents, which are two pieces of black tape, and show that these have a tick next to them to show how these match up, and this is good news. This demonstrates to the non-sighted person, once they initially feel around the board, it's in a concealed location that the sighted person wouldn't see, but once they feel around the board, they'll feel these two patterns, which are quite prominent with a touch, and then feel the tick next to them, to feel that this is how you match up. I then have the bottom one to show how the indents and a tick as well. This demonstrates how you have two different paths to be able to connect the blocks, which we felt directly from the non-sighted person. I come up with this through watching the videos and doing my own research with how a non-sighted person initially feels out the products that's in front of them and how the pieces could go together, as they don't really jump in. This will be one of the first things that they feel, as they feel the riggedness and structured rig, and feel around this rig, and they'll feel that these indents are quite prominent, and these are the things that they'll pick up on straight away. So then, to conceal this part, really for a sighted person, I colour all this in black and spray paint it in black to match the rest of the top of the design, so then you can't actually see this quite well as you could before, which kind of takes away and gets involved in the distraction from the sighted person. So just mapping out my design, I look at how I've just mapped out one design of how the electricity flow, and this can be seen in front of us. If we look on this, we can see how there's a black piece on the right and a black piece on the top. This can be shown to be a decompression and compression part. So with this, I had to think about, and through my research, it was really hard to add multiple different manufactured parts to be able to screw these pieces together. Due to electricity to flow, you need a pretty firm connection of the two aluminium foils of each block to be put in together. With this, I had to try and think of a way of something that allows the blocks to put in, compressing this faction, but then also decompressing and pushing the blocks together to make them keep tight when in block. With this, I thought of doing my own research and innovating my own product and design to using like thinking of bumpers on cars or on boats when they load to a barge. With this, I got a bit of paper, so probably I think 50 or so pages, and put them together. With this, I wrap them around with electrical tape around the edge. This allows for enough compression to be able to place the blocks in place, but then once you let go of that bit of compression, it allows the blocks to the side bumpers to decompress and push them tight. This makes it really easy for a non-sighted person just to push the blocks in place, allowing when they're pushing in the last block in place, it compresses the side bumpers, and then when they take it off, it decompresses to hold them tight. This is my own engineered design to try and make this block system really work every single time with the electricity flow when every single block is in place. I show how I've demonstrated a second design, and this is just mapping out that second design of what could be to gain the next 10% for the course of how two things can flow. This is an example of how I continue to use critical reflection to improve my product. With this, I was testing out how the spray paint would work and how I can implement imprints that will try and implement distraction to the user. I ended up going with the colouring with highlighter over the artifact of the black spray paint to try and distract the user or the sighted person. Looking at the image in front of us, I can show you that I've spray painted the design in black. This had to be really careful, as I couldn't spray paint every single block around the total block, as if I spray painted over the electricity and conductive path of some of the blocks, it would make these parts non-conductive anymore, as the aluminium foil would be covered in paint, which is not conductive. Therefore, I had to do every single block and spray paint every single block individually to make sure I only spray painted the top of the block. Furthering this, once the whole design was spray painted, I drew a face from the center, and I've also drew numbers on each of the blocks. This is trying to add distraction and add try and use the sighted person's own heuristics against them through using how they similar fix puzzles and put puzzles in place, as they try and look at the numbers and try and match up the numbers, or how they look at the small picture that's on the side and they try and match a picture in the puzzle. This is trying to really add distraction and add my own engineered complexity to the design, and trying to make sure that they go that way first and they don't really pick up on the other things that's going on, which are the small little feel and touching things. This is using the other mode of communication of sight to try and add distraction and add confusion to the person that is sighted. With this, the non-sighted person doesn't see any of this, and all they're focused on is the touch components, which is the correct way of how to put the puzzle together. I really went above and beyond to try and test the prototype. I used this to get my twin brother to try and test out the prototype and see if it's a sighted person. With this, I didn't give any explanation except the same explanation that I'll give to a non-sighted person of complete the puzzle, turn the fan on. With this, he showed and proved that it took quite a long time and he got distracted in the complexity and couldn't actually figure out the puzzle to the design. I will show this in a video that I'll show you just after this. After giving him the facts of how to break down the puzzle and how to actually solve the puzzle, I demonstrated how to solve the puzzle, but then also show him how simplicity can bring within complexity, and then show how a non-sighted person will find this really simple to navigate the path of the puzzle. With this, I show how breaking down his own heuristics and getting rid of his past distractions and past experiences of how to solve puzzles demonstrates how it's an analogy to complexity. So you're working into as you walk into a complex situation, you should really just look at the components and look at how they interact with each other to try and see the simple solution of how this works. Hello, so I'm now here at the finished product of the puzzle. So initially, all we have is these 12 blocks of the puzzle that fit into this structured 3D puzzle. With this, we have the fan that generates electricity through the end wire and the initial wire that goes from the battery. The battery can be concealed in the products, just as we can see here. It is a fairly rigid design, as this helps it stay in place every single time. We can see, as I talked before, that we have the bumpers that are used with compression and depression to hold the puzzle in tight to make sure the conductive parts are really flat and taut. Looking at one of these blocks, we can show that the part is concealed through covering it up with aluminium foil. On top, we can see that there's raised and indented path to show how every single path that has a conducting path through the center, which is a bit of a wire. So I've actually ripped this apart so that we can see. So if we look inside, we can see that there's a small little metal frays that conduct the path. This shows how the connected path is showing. And if we look at this design, we can show that there's raised paths which demonstrate which way the conductivity of the paths goes through to flow electricity. In the design, I give out the picture of showing how just some sighted things that distracts the user for a sighted person. With this is not just information and trying to break down and add distractions to the and add complexity and engineer complexity to the product. This is used to try and use the sighted person against their own assumed knowledge against themselves of how they solved puzzles in the past. With this design, you can see that there's no touch aspects for this, and we can see that there's only touch aspects for this design, so then for a non-sighted person, that's all they will feel. If we go into the side, this is using my own cybernetics from the start to show how there's a touch aspects. So if we feel the touch aspects, we can feel that there's a raised and indented path and a tick. This is showing how I really wanted to not use Braille in the aspects, as this was frowned upon, to try and go into a deeper engineering complexity to show that even people that can't read Braille and are blind can solve this product, which is feeling on the sides that there's two raised edges and the tick next to them, and that's how the path goes. Or the second method to try and achieve the next 10% of the course is to feel that there's two indented paths and a tick next to that as well, to show that's how you put the puzzle together. So I'll now show and explain how I put through the puzzle using this. So start with feel, and we'll go with the raised edges, which are concealed with black masking tape and then covered over with spray paint, so it's hard to see and the user or the sighted person gets distracted from this. So we'll start by putting the places in place and matching up each of these as the key on the side shows, matching up the raised indents. With this, you see that these two match up. Then we've got two at the bottom here, So we can feel that those two match up. These next two match up. We've got another two that match up. So there's only one pass for this method to be matched up, and then other than this, they would not work. So now that we've got all this matched up, we have to fill the next blocks in to try and make sure the conductive path is allowed. As we can see, that from my picture before, this will not make the face that is distracted. As we can see, that the conductive path does not work until the last, we can see with the fan, until the last puzzle is put in place, as the bumpers are used to press out and push all the conductive paths together. So if I put this last one in place, we can see that the fan turns on straight away. If I take any one of these out, we can show that the path stops because of the compression of these electricity passes are not touching each other. This was designed after many iterations to try and make sure that the conductive path, there's only one way to put the path together and for the actual electricity to flow. If this was not followed, then the fan would not turn on and the puzzle would not be solved. So I'll now show how we match up the second circuit, which is the next 10% of how this circuit can be put together to make a conductive path. This is demonstrated through the blocks having the indents, which are quite easy to feel on the blocks. So we put these together, we can match up the indents quite easily. As we'll see again, the fan is not on when the path is put together. So we have to make sure that every single block is put in place before the fan turns on. So the fan is still not on. Then we put in the last block and the fan turns on, just like that. That shows the number 2 way of how the fan actually works and the electricity path flows through the circuit. In this, we can show that the face is not actually prominent in this. So then it is actually quite distracting, and as well we can show that these numbers don't line up in any single order, and they're just randomized throughout the process, to showing that we're trying to really distract and add complexity to the sighted person, and then really show simplicity within complexity for the non-sighted person. The embedded analogy of complexity with this project can be shown through the underlying theme of how critical reflection from the user can show that through looking at their own distractions and their own assumptions are actually the wrong way of how to do a puzzle, and thinking back, and once they finish putting the place, which can be seen through the video of my twin brother, that if they follow this and follow their own heuristics and have that as the wrong way, they can show that the complexity is actually really simple. So if they look at and break down with no assumptions of how the puzzles go together, and they actually use the other mode of communication of feeling. With this, we can see the fan actually works when we actually use this next mode of communication of touch, and how we feel, and we actually use this, not our own heuristics, and try and break down the problem and not go in with assumptions into the complex situation, as this is where complexity is really shown, whereas simplicity is really shown where you come in with no assumptions and you just look at the connection and the connectivity between the blocks, and which is really a strong analogy of how complex is within a project. Thank you.